It's me again. So we previously looked at purposes of assessment and types of assessment. Now we're going to be looking at something called value added. This is a specific way of looking at assessment. It's not done in all states, but it is done in Ohio, is one of the many states who looks at value added. Let's see what this is all about. So House Bill 3, some time ago, was put into place to assure that schools in Ohio were looking at what we call value added. And this is a way that schools have accountability, and one of the ways that they have to report their standardized test data. So first, let's understand some terms so that we can understand what value added actually is. The first term is achievement. Now, you're probably used to hearing that word when it comes to achievement tests. So achievement is looking at what a student knows at a given point in time. So an achievement test measures what you know on that day, what you have learned so far, right? That's achievement. And yes, I am telling you achievement tests tell you what you know right now. So achievement tests can also compare what you know or compare your performance on that test to some sort of a standard. Now, we saw that in our previous video, and we call that a criterion referenced assessment. So here, for instance, here is the cut score or the standard, and here you can look at everybody's score in comparison to that. This is what typical achievement test data looks like. So you might get this back for an individual student, or if you're a parent for your child, it would tell you about the type of test that was taken, and it would show you in comparison to all the other students where your student scored. And one of the standards you can look at is typically at grade level performance, right? All right, well, that's achievement. Value added is a little bit different. So value added is looking at the effect that the school has on your knowledge and your progress from one year to the next. Value added. How much value was added in the last school year for you? That is how value added is different. So it's measuring growth over time. So you can probably guess that means it's more than one test. So an achievement test just tells you, what do I know right now? Value added requires more than one test to see, okay, what did you know at the beginning of the school year and what do you know at the end of the school year? And the basic premise is each student should make what we call a year's growth within that school year. So we know where you should start off and the idea of where you should end. You should see growth during that school year. Okay, so here's an animation that I tried to make to try to explain and show you the difference with value added. Let's give it a watch. So the year progresses. We see Paige isn't working that hard. Fred is trying to work pretty hard. Now they've got their value-added results. Paige is in the 80th percentile, and she's like, see, I'm still doing great. But what's missing? She didn't show any growth. Fred technically didn't do as well, but showed great improvement. And again, I couldn't find any videos on value added, and when you can't find a video on something, sometimes you try to make one. So hopefully that helped a little bit. Hopefully this chart will also help. So here we have two students. In red we have Johnny, in blue we have Susie. Here we're seeing how they scored on their achievement test in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. And this black bar is representing the standard. This is a very different way of looking at things, because if you just go by achievement tests, you would say, you know what, Johnny is doing great. And Johnny always does great because he's always, high above the standard. And you would say, whew, Susie's not doing so well. She's always below the standard. But value added says, maybe Susie's doing better because Susie is showing growth. She's showing tremendous growth each year, more than a year's learning in a year's time. Johnny is actually showing decreases, that he's learning less as time goes on, which can happen. Some of your high achieving students just kind of coast, and then it ends up coming out that, they're not learning as well. So achievement status is how you do at one point in time, right? In comparison to that norm, whereas growth is looking at from one year to the next. All right, so why might this be helpful? Why might this be important enough that there was actually a House bill put into place to say that we need to measure this? Any thoughts? Well, let's see. There are a lot of ways you can look at value added, and one thing that's really interesting about it, I learned this in a conference session, a professional development training I went to in Columbus, and they had recently done some research and showed that achievement test scores are highly correlated to family background. Okay, value added is not. That is a huge finding. Okay, because we saw when we talked about student differences that things like poverty and ethnicity and things like that can be connected to things like GPA. Value added is not. It is a more valid measure. So here's achievement test scores by poverty in students. And you can see as students become more likely to be living in a situation of poverty, their achievement test scores go down. Okay, so that's one relationship. Here's value added by poverty. 0. 0 meaning there's no correlation whatsoever between poverty and value added. Achievement level, so achievement test scores by minority status. Again, we see a correlation. We do not with value added. So value added is perhaps a more pure measure of what you're learning that is not confounded by family life experiences, ethnicity, poverty, and so on. So how do we measure it? You take student performance on their standardized tests and you compare it from one year to the next and look at growth. And then when they present these results to you, it's in a very nice, easy to read, color-coded format. It's a stoplight system. Green means the student got above expected growth. Now, do you remember what expected growth was? A year's growth in a year's time, right? So green means you got more than a year's growth in a year's time. Yellow means you met the goal, and the goal was 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. So yellow is also excellent. Yellow is what you're striving for. Green is even better than that. Red simply means that you did not get a year's growth in a year's time. You were below expected growth. So here's a sample value-added assessment report. And you can see you don't need to understand the statistics. You only need to look at the color coding. And by looking at this, I can easily see where the students did poorly. That the 5th graders at Smith Elementary School were the ones who did not meet the standard when it came to mathematics. All right, when it comes to value added, Ohio does reward you, and by reward I mean financial rewards when it comes to budgets. They reward if you're seeing green or yellow, if you're having sufficient growth, and they will financially penalize you by perhaps cutting your budget if you have insufficient growth or red. In terms of where they calculate these, they don't do it for every grade and every subject. It's typically grades 4 through 8, although these things do change over time, and it's typically in reading and math. And whenever they're doing ratings, they typically look at district and school scores, not individual students. These are compilations. When it comes to data availability, you can go to the ODE website and you can look at value-added reports for pretty much any school. And when you do look them up, you'll see something like this. So Belpre City, that's near where I live, I can take a look at how they're doing in reading, how they're doing in math, and how they're doing overall by grade levels. So that's it for value added. This one is a little short and sweet, but this one, again, is not used in every state, but is becoming more and more common. So thank you.